You are standing somewhere that has never once cast a shadow. Light comes from every direction at once, and there is no sun to explain it. A single river leaves the ground and splits into four, and the riverbed underneath it is gold, real gold. The kind men will spend the next 6,000 years killing each other over. This is Eden, before anything went wrong. And there is something in this garden more radiant than the man, more radiant than the woman, more radiant than the trees themselves. A guardian, covered in precious stone the way a field is covered in morning dew, sardius, topaz, emerald, sapphire, set into his very being like they grew there naturally. The prophet Ezekiel, writing centuries later, called him the anointed cherub who covers. He walked among fiery stones that belonged to God alone. And in the Hebrew, there is a word for what he was on the day he was created, tamim. Blameless, perfect in every one of his ways. Until the day he wasn't. Stop and sit with that word for a second, blameless. Not mostly good, not good enough. Every one of his ways, blameless, until something shifted inside him that God never put there. If you've ever wondered how evil could exist in a universe made entirely by a good God, this is the Bible's answer, and it's not a comfortable one. Evil didn't arrive from outside creation. It grew, quietly, inside something beautiful, and nobody saw it coming, not even the being it was growing inside of. Here's what most people miss about the story of Satan. They picture him arriving in Eden already evil, already a snake, already the villain. But the text says something stranger. He was already there. He was the most beautiful thing God had made, standing guard over the most beautiful place God had made, and somewhere in that beauty, a thought took root. Ezekiel names it in one line. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. Not because of hatred, not because of some cosmic grudge. Because of beauty. He looked at what he had, and it wasn't enough. Isaiah gives him a name for this moment. Helel ben Shachar, Shining One, Son of the Dawn. You may know it by its Latin translation, Lucifer, Morning Star. And the ambition Isaiah records is almost embarrassingly specific. I will ascend. I will raise my throne. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. I will make myself like the Most High. 5 sentences. 5 declarations of I, not we. Not us. I. The first sin in the universe wasn't a bitten piece of fruit. It was a pronoun. And here is where it gets remarkable. He didn't just want power. He wanted a paradise of his own throne, his own mountain, his own version of what God already had. He didn't want to destroy Eden. He wanted to build one. A counterfeit one, with himself sitting where God should sit. He fell for it. He fell from the mountain of God the way lightning falls, Jesus would say centuries later, watching this ancient story compress itself into a single flash of memory. And then he did something that should chill you more than anything else in this story. He went back, not to heaven, to the garden, the one place that still had everything he had just lost. You know how the rest goes, or you think you do. A serpent in a tree. A conversation with a woman named Eve. A piece of fruit. But look at what he actually offers her, word for word. You will be like God. The exact ambition that got him thrown out of heaven in the first place, now repackaged as a gift for someone else. He wasn't trying to destroy paradise. He was trying to recruit 2 more residents for the paradise he'd already failed to build for himself. Adam and Eve said yes. And the real Eden, the one with no shadows, closed its gate behind them, guarded now by an angel with a flaming sword instead of a cherub covered in jewels. Stay with me here, because this is the pattern you're going to watch repeat for the next 6,000 years of human history. Every single time, someone tries to rebuild what was lost in Eden without going back to the God who built the original. Every single time, it looks beautiful at first. And every single time, it collapses. There is one more garden coming in this story. One final paradise Satan will try to build, on a much bigger scale than a single tree. We will get there, but not yet. If you've never noticed the Bible telling the exact same story 6 different times across 6 different centuries, you're about to see why people who study this for a living can't stop pointing it out. And if patterns like this are the kind of thing you want more of in your feed, this channel traces them every week. Move forward a few centuries to a plain in the land of Shinar, where a group of people who survived a flood decide they've had enough of being scattered and small. They start baking bricks, not stone, bricks made by human hands, the ancient equivalent of prefabricated construction. And they use the bricks to build a tower whose top, the text says, will reach the heavens. Listen to their actual reasoning. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed. Not a temple to honor God. A monument to themselves, tall enough to touch the place Satan had once tried to sit. Here's the part nobody tells you about Babel. The Hebrew word for that tower's city is Babel, and it comes from Balal, to confuse. But the people who built it almost certainly called it something else, a name related to the Akkadian Bab-I-Lim, Gate of God. They thought they were building a doorway to heaven. God came down, the text says, almost sarcastically, to see the tower that they thought could reach him. And with a single word he didn't need to raise his voice for, he confused their language, and the gate of God became the city of confusion. A counterfeit heaven, built without the one who actually lives there, dissolves the moment it's finished. You'd think humanity would learn. It didn't. Centuries later, a nation of former slaves is wandering out of Egypt, and Egypt itself deserves a mention here, because it was its own kind of counterfeit paradise. A civilization built on a river that flooded every year with almost supernatural reliability, feeding the richest empire on earth, decorated in gold, worshipped by its own people as the literal dwelling place of gods on the Nile. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described Egypt's wealth as so vast it seemed built for permanence. It wasn't. 10 plagues later, that permanence cracked in a single night. But it gets stranger, because the nation God pulled out of Egypt built its own counterfeit not long after. While Moses is up on a mountain receiving instructions for how to actually meet with God, the people at the bottom of that mountain melt down their jewelry and build a golden calf. Not because they hated God. Because they wanted a God they could see, touch, and control, an Eden they could build with their own hands instead of waiting on one they couldn't. Every counterfeit paradise in this story runs on the exact same engine. I don't need to trust what I can't see, if I build something I can. Think about how fast this happened. Weeks, maybe days, after watching an entire empire collapse in front of their eyes, after walking through a sea with walls of water on either side of them, after eating bread that appeared on the ground every single morning without fail. You'd expect this generation to be the last people on earth who needed a substitute God. And yet there they are, at the foot of the very mountain where the real one is speaking, deciding they'd rather have something smaller they could hold in their hands. You have probably done a version of this yourself, if you're honest. Not with gold jewelry. With something else you could control, something smaller than what you actually needed, because waiting felt unbearable and building felt so much faster. Here's what most people miss about the wilderness story, though, and it's the sharpest version of this pattern in the entire Bible. Centuries after Moses, another man walks into a wilderness of his own. No food, no water, 40 days alone, physically as weak as a human being can be and still be alive. And Satan, the same shining one who fell for his own reflection, the same voice that once said you will be like God, appears in front of Jesus and offers him the deal directly this time. No serpent, no disguise. He shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. The Greek text calls it the cosmos, the entire ordered system of human civilization. Every counterfeit Eden ever built rolled into one panoramic view, and he says, "All this I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Think about what that offer actually is. Satan is offering Jesus the exact throne he tried to steal from God in the beginning. He is offering to hand over every fake paradise he's ever built, Babel's tower, Egypt's gold, every golden calf melted down by frightened people, in exchange for the one thing he wanted from the very start. Worship. Not obedience, not fear. Worship, aimed at him instead of at the one it was always meant for. And here is the part that should genuinely stop you for a second. Jesus was hungry. He was alone. He had nothing. And he still said no. Not because the kingdoms weren't real. Not because the offer wasn't tempting. He said no because he understood something Adam didn't, something the builders of Babel didn't, something the people at the foot of that mountain melting down their earrings didn't. Paradise you build for yourself is never the paradise you were made for. Now watch what happens next, because Satan doesn't stop trying after that failure. He simply changes his method. Instead of tempting one man in a wilderness, he starts building an empire. Centuries earlier, actually, this had already begun. A king named Nebuchadnezzar stood on the roof of his own palace in the city of Babylon, the same region as that ancient tower, rebuilt bigger and gaudier than before, and said, out loud, "Is this not great Babylon, which I have built, by my mighty power, for the glory of my majesty?" The exact same pronoun problem. I built, my power, my majesty. The text says that before the words had even left his mouth, judgment fell on him. But Babylon itself didn't fall that day. It kept growing. It kept glittering. It became the most famous counterfeit paradise in human history. Hanging gardens, towering walls, wealth beyond counting, and at its spiritual center, according to ancient accounts including those referenced by the Roman historian Tacitus, temples devoted to gods who were never real, worshipped by people who mistook gold for glory. Here's the part nobody tells you. Babylon never actually died. It became a symbol. You have probably admired something the way that crowd once admired Babylon's walls, a career, a bank account, a following, a house, without ever asking who actually gets the credit for it. That question is not an accusation. It is the exact same question Nebuchadnezzar forgot to ask, standing on his own rooftop, one sentence before everything changed for him. Centuries later, an old man exiled to a rocky island called Patmos sees the whole pattern one final time, compressed into a single terrifying vision. His name was John, and what he sees is a woman, dressed in purple and scarlet, glittering with gold and pearls and precious stones. The same kind of stones Ezekiel once described covering the cherub in Eden, sitting on a scarlet beast, holding a golden cup. Written across her forehead is a name: Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. Do you see it yet? Look at the jewels again. Sardius, topaz, emerald, sapphire, pearl, gold. The exact stones that covered the most beautiful creature God ever made, back before his heart was lifted up because of his beauty. The final counterfeit Eden in the entire Bible is dressed, quite literally, in the same jewelry the first one wore. And then, in a single chapter, it falls. Not slowly. Not over centuries the way Babel dissolved or Egypt eroded. In 1 hour, the text says, 3 separate times, like a bell tolling. In 1 hour your judgment has come. In 1 hour she has been laid waste. In 1 hour all this wealth has been laid waste. The merchants of the earth weep over her, because there is no one left to buy their cargo, gold, jewels, fine linen, and then, almost as an afterthought buried in a list of luxury goods, the text adds, and human souls. That is what every counterfeit Eden costs in the end. Not just money. People. This is the garden we were waiting for. This is where the open loop from the very beginning of this video finally closes. 6,000 years after a cherub covered in jewels looked at his own beauty and decided it wasn't enough, the same jewels appear one final time, wrapped around a city that gets destroyed in 60 minutes. But, and this is the part that changes everything, the story doesn't end with a ruined counterfeit. It ends with the original restored. 2 chapters later, John sees another vision. Not a woman covered in stolen jewels sitting on a beast. A city, coming down out of heaven, prepared like a bride. And this city has its own jewels too. The same 12 stones, almost exactly, sardius and topaz and emerald among them. Set not into a fallen cherub's chest but into the foundations of a wall guarding something no one will ever be thrown out of again. In the middle of that city, a tree. The same tree, or its true descendant, that stood in the original Eden. Except this time its leaves exist for the healing of nations instead of a test that could be failed. And there will be no more curse, the text says. No more shadows. No more counterfeit thrones, because the throne of God and of the Lamb is simply, finally, there. Here's what 6,000 years of counterfeit paradises actually teaches you, if you're paying attention. Every fake Eden in this story, the tower, the calf, the empire, the jewel-covered woman on the beast, glittered exactly like the real thing. That was never the flaw. The flaw was always what was missing underneath the glitter. The presence of the one who actually built paradise in the first place. You cannot recreate Eden by copying its decorations. Sardius and topaz and gold were never the point. They were just what was lying around a place where God actually lived. If this pattern is new to you, if you've read these stories your whole life and never noticed they were the same story, told 6 different times, that's exactly why this channel exists. We trace patterns like this every week, straight through scripture, and there is more waiting for you if you stay. Before we get to what this actually means for you, sit with the shape of it one more time. A cherub covered in jewels, wanting more. A tower of bricks, reaching for a heaven it couldn't afford. A calf of melted gold, standing in for a God who wouldn't be rushed. An empire on a river, worship like it would last forever. A king on his own rooftop, admiring his own reflection in stone and gold. A city on a beast, dressed in the very jewels that once covered a cherub. 6 imitations. 1 pattern. 0 exceptions. Not one of them lasted, not one of them satisfied, not one of them was ever going to be enough, no matter how convincing the glitter looked from a distance. So here are 3 things worth carrying out of this video with you. First, beauty is never proof of God's presence. The most beautiful thing Satan ever built still ended in 1 hour. Don't judge a paradise by its glitter. Judge it by who it belongs to. Second, this pattern is still running today, in smaller ways than Babylon but with the exact same engine underneath. Anytime you build your worth, your security, or your identity out of something you made with your own hands instead of receiving it from the one who made you, you are, in miniature, building your own small Babel. It is worth asking, honestly, what you have been building lately and who it was actually for. And third, the one that should stay with you longest. Every counterfeit Eden in human history has fallen. Every single one, without exception, in a single hour or over 1,000 years. But the real Eden, the one being rebuilt right now in that vision John saw on a rocky island in exile, does not fall. It cannot, because unlike every imitation that came before it, this one was never built by hands trying to make a name for themselves. It was built, from the very beginning, by the only one who ever actually lived there. The garden closes. And then, somehow, against every pattern this story has shown you, the garden opens again.